Jennifer Edgin's Assistant Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare N2N6. It's great to talk to you again. Thanks for joining me. Let's start with a kind of a scene setter. What is electronic warfare in the way that the Navy thinks about it and operates on it?
Electronic warfare for the Navy is all about how we use the electromagnetic spectrum for our strategic advantage. So that means, how do we use the spectrum to degrade, deny, deceive, and disrupt our adversary and protect ourselves at the same time? Now, this can be a little bit of an esoteric concept for folks because you can't really see the electromagnetic spectrum unless you use a prism, and then you can only see a portion of it. So I actually looked up a historic example of the first instance of electronic warfare that I think would actually resonate with the audience. The first reported instance, according to the internet, was the use in the siege of Ladysmith during the Boer War, where the British actually tried to send a Morse code signal off a cloud with their searchlight. The Boers saw this and then tried to jam it with their searchlight. So when you think about how we use the spectrum, it's those set of capabilities that allow us to disrupt information flow and provide ourselves a strategic advantage, thereby giving us more survivable platforms and more options for our commanders.
So using that example, that's different than the way I was thinking about spectrum in preparing to talk to you about this conversation. I was thinking about spectrum from the perspective of certain bandwidths or certain tubes that organizations use to get information from one place to another. Radio signals, television signals are part of, they operate at certain places on the spectrum. Is it the same thing? Is it the same idea in a different application?
Yes. So anything that we try to do, whether it be from an electronic attack, an electronic protection, all uses those different sections of the spectrum in different ways. And we could dive into our physics knowledge and go into, sine wavelength, amplitude, and that's really what those different sections offer. But when we think about it from a Navy perspective, we really think about it in three buckets. Electronic attack, so those things that you think of directed energy weapons, some of those, more traditional things that come to mind. Electronic protection, so how do you operate within the spectrum? How do you have options for the commander to employ to degrade or deny? And then electronic support. So those are all those foundational elements. So things like new advances in technology, the threat picture, and how we can bring all those options together to provide a toolkit for our sailors and decision makers.
All right. I have no physics knowledge to dive into to have that conversation with you, but I imagine that it's really important to what sailors and Marines need. Pursuant to that, what are the important elements of what you're doing to for what those warfighters need on the front lines, and how is that continuing to evolve, Jennifer?
So much like you see in many of our technology disciplines right now, EW is a heavily technology-focused area. So I like to think of things as an ecosystem. I'll use the biology example of everything in our ecosystem is interconnected. So we want to have a strong, robust R&D apparatus. We want to have strong teaming with our partners and allies. Because when we look at how we deliver capabilities to our sailors, it begins with design. Design informed by R&D, design informed by the commercial picture, design informed by the threat picture. Then as we deploy those technologies, we want to be able to do it rapidly. And we want to be able to respond to changes that may be occurring, whether it be in peacetime or wartime. We want to make sure that we can provide the most relevant information and capabilities to the sailors right when they need them. Mm-hmm. And lastly, when it comes to disposal, eventually, things need to be upgraded or disposed of. So it's an entire life cycle. And at each stage of that, there's options to learn, options to continuously improve, and options to grow.
Who are the key stakeholders in that vision that you just laid out, both within the Navy and I imagine industry, and there are other aspects too?
Absolutely. So if I look at, where are big capture elements, particularly with interfaces with our R&D options, so things like labs, both government and commercial and in industry. A great host of that is Office of Naval Research and the Naval Research Labs. So those really provide that conduit to quickly assess that landscape. And then when we get into the actual development of capabilities, certainly our acquisition community takes front and center stage, and our own government in-house warfare centers allow us to rapidly innovate and harness that research and development. And then when we get into employment, of course, our partners and allies across the globe are active participants in our entire workup cycles, and then obviously we employ as a united front.
The difficulty that it strikes me that you run into is that as rapidly as the technology that sits around the things that you're talking about is changing, integrating that into the workflows that you're trying to provide for warfighters becomes more and more difficult. How do you tackle that challenge, and how do you I mean, 2 years ago, we weren't talking about artificial intelligence at all. Now it's a hugely important part of just about everything that everybody's doing. How do you integrate something like that into something when the landscape is changing as rapidly as it is?
So if I could sum it up in one sentence, it's begin with the end in mind. And so this really becomes a foundational design principle. So when you talk about an individual technology, well, if you think, how would a sailor use that? How would a decision maker use that? That increases the robustness of your design. It isn't just this, random object that you're trying to find a home for. It's something that's built into your entire decision-making cycle. That allows you to develop a much better product. So it's really, harnessing those design thinking principles that you see in the commercial space and applying them to our military space.
And I imagine keeping that in top of mind gets you out of the situation where you're saying, hey, AI is pretty cool. We should figure out some way to use AI without really thinking about the use case going into it.
Right. And if I could add a little bit more to that, when we talk about AI, an important question that I ask sailors is, what do you want a computer to do for you? Mm-hmm. Because if you think and you study how sailors perform missions, you see a lot of sailors spending a lot of time sorting through data. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to spend my time figuring out what that data means. So if we can use AI-enabled tools to assist our sailors and decision makers, that's the sweet spot. Mm-hmm. Computers are good at sifting through large amounts of things very quickly. Humans are good at interpreting what that means and making decisions.
Mm-hmm. Are you to a point in the Navy now where you are comfortable with the data, the quality of the data that's being fed into these applications, that what comes out will be actionable from a decision-making perspective?
When I think about that entire data lifecycle, I have the focus of strong engineering and validation throughout. Mm-hmm. This isn't a fire and forget scenario. As you groom your data, as you look at how these different AI-enabled technologies are using that data, rigorous verification and validation built into the entire lifecycle is important, because you don't want your algorithms learning in the wrong way. And that's what's really important when we have the AI conversation. It isn't just a deliver and forget. You have to have that entire sustainment tail to make sure that it's doing the things that you want it to do, the things that you expect it to do, and then most of all, doing it accurately.
I imagine EW does not exist in a vacuum, nor do you want it to. What does the connective tissue look like to connect EW to other types of capabilities? What's the integration look like more broadly than what we've been talking about?
Right. And so this is a very similar theme to many of the previous questions. Things aren't stovepiped anymore. When you look at a decision cycle, or that observe, orient, detect, and act loop, you want to make sure that you have a multi-domain view of the situation. So you want to be able to combine your EW knowledge with things in your ISR space, or things in some of your other intelligence spaces. That multidisciplined approach yields much stronger outcomes and decisions.
This question's maybe more existential or theoretical than tactical, but you said things aren't stovepiped anymore. How'd you break that cycle? Because that's been a challenge for the department probably since there's been a department. And how do you stay out of that cycle? How do you keep from backsliding to a state where everybody recognized that silos weren't great, but people until recently had challenges getting out of that cycle?
I think this starts with the foundation of what makes the Navy culture great. That's that willingness to try new things. And so leveraging that in this space, it became how do you bring people together and offer them opportunities to collaborate, innovate, solve problems. And if we look at the work that Admiral Kilby has brought forward with our Get Real, Get Better mindsets, at the heart of that, it's that problem solving or a customer focused culture. So those mindsets have been super important and have allowed us to not only address problems, but do it in a sustainable way that is scaled to all elements of our force.
Final thought, what are you watching over the landscape that may not be something that you need to tackle right now, but is something that is on your radar screen to be aware of that will become important in the EW space in the next 2 years, 5 years, something like that?
So we're constantly scanning the horizon. So if we look at some of the advancements that we're having, particularly in the fields of AI, particularly in the fields of low-cost computing, those can become really great opportunity spaces to unleash some of these technologies into the hands of our force. And so as we go back to outthinking our adversary, arming those sailors and decision makers with those robust, very fast and capable tool sets will ensure our strategic advantage.
Jennifer, it's great to talk to you again. Thanks for your time today.